Good morning once again. Welcome back to ARC Salt Lake. We're coming up on 7:30. Glad you could join us today. We've heard a lot about some of these topics we're going to talk about here this morning. Public pressure forced Utah leaders to change course on a number of topics. There was opposition to data centers and a proposed ICE facility here in Salt Lake City. And political science professor Jim Curry is with us now to discuss this public pushback. He is a professor now at Notre Dame. You were here in Utah as well, so you're very familiar with some of these hot button issues. Let's start first of all with that ICE facility no longer coming to Salt Lake City, and public outcry definitely played a big part in that, right?
That's right. This reflects the shifting politics of the Trump administration's approach to immigration policy. As the administration has worn on, public approval for its sort of hardline approach to deportation or detention has waned. Early in his term, a majority of the public supported these sorts of actions on immigration, but now that's slipped to closer to 40% or below. And we've seen the new Department of Homeland Security Secretary Mark Wayne Mullen take several steps to try to walk back some of the more controversial and confrontational plans that have been put in place by his predecessor.
And we do know that we do need these data centers because, you know, people, they have all of their devices like this, and we need to power those. So what do people need to do to maybe understand this more? And of course, they were very outspoken on the way it was done, but do we need to find better ways of doing it?
Yeah, with the with the data centers, I think what you're seeing is that this has become something that's politically toxic throughout most of the country, owing to the perceptions of the effects on energy cost, and especially in Utah and Western states, water use. And we saw this really bite a few of our politicians hard. We saw Senate President Stuart Adams shockingly lose in his primary, in part due to the planned data center in Box Center County. What the legislature is doing now, I think, is what you would hope our lawmakers would do in a situation like this where the public speaks and people are unhappy. They're trying to find out a way forward where potentially building new data centers can still be done, but in a way that the public is more satisfied. Likely what you need is legislation that at least appears to shift the balance of costs and benefits. Utahns need to feel like building a data center is something that's good for them and not just for developers or for people in the tech industry. If the legislature can accomplish that, perhaps they resolve this. But if not, we may see the continued backlash that we see throughout the country.
And so what about lawmakers right now? What do they need to come up with to make this maybe a little more appealing to you and me on the outside?
I think there needs to be legislation that shows where money or other benefits would come in. So there's some places in the country where sort of the revenue benefits of building a data center are so substantial that the public can easily process how this helps the state, their county, their community. There are places in Northern Virginia, for instance, where this has meant a whole truckload of new cash that can be put towards public works projects, infrastructure development that actually helps Americans in their day-to-day lives, or that would in this case help Utahns in their day-to-day lives. But it has to be really obvious. Any legislation that would pass or any changes to how these deals work have to make very clear to the public that, okay, we can see where there's a benefit from doing this and we don't just see the costs.
Do you think we were moving too fast on data centers?
I think in a way, yes. I think because the public hadn't caught up to the pros and cons, how this might help the state versus how it might hurt the people in the state in various ways. It's often better when there could be that kind of backlash to take it slow, make sure that the public can move along. But you run up against, then you're trying to compete with other parts of the country, other areas who are trying to do the same thing as you. And so there's that push and pull between trying to get the thing that you think would be good for your state if you're a leader, while also making sure the public is bought in and is coming along with you.
Okay, let's shift gears a little bit now. Governor Cox animated on big budget overruns in Utah Medicaid program, and maybe that caught a lot of people off guard, but he was pretty profound on how he felt about it.
Yeah, he seemed pretty upset. It's not the first time we've seen Governor Cox get animated in a response to a reporter during a question in a press conference. But I think sometimes you see that kind of response from him when he feels like the question is sort of leading and sort of insinuating that there's a reason for something that he doesn't see as sort of the reason. And with Medicaid, this is a policy that's notoriously difficult to budget for. So I don't think he liked the implication that it was necessarily fraud, waste, or abuse rather than something that the state is legitimately challenged with.
Okay, and there's also an issue coming out of COVID. Did Utah leaders not come up with a plan earlier to account for the budget downfalls that we experienced? Can Utah be to blame for some of that?
With the Medicaid issue, I don't think it's that simple. What you're going to have to spend on Medicaid from year to year is driven by all sorts of unpredictable factors like shifting enrollment numbers, changing healthcare needs, rising long-term costs of care, and really importantly for this, changing federal policies. The federal government has repeatedly, 4 or 5 times just in the last 6 years, changed Medicaid policy at the federal level in ways that would affect what states need to do with their budgets. And that's put a lot more uncertainty than usual into what a state needs to do to plan for a 5 or 10-year outlook on how many people are going to be enrolled in Medicaid, what are going to be the associated costs. This has been a big challenge for states across the country, not just Utah. And I think what states would really benefit from would be maybe some stability in Medicaid policy for the time being.
All right, let's talk about Iran now. President Trump claims that the Strait of Hormuz is an American territory. And what would be your views on that? And what kind of, PR does that put out there?
Well, he can claim the territory if he wants, but it doesn't have much practical consequence. I think what you said right there, and that this is public relations, this is PR. The president is trying to do something bold to claim that we're going to take control of the strait. The president knows that the blockade of the strait has been problematic, and for most Americans, they associate it with rising costs. But this doesn't really make any practical effect on the ground. It doesn't change anything about the constant conflict between the United States and Iran over the control of the strait and the ability of ships to move through it. And so it's more messaging than it is any sort of real substantive change to anything going on.
Okay. And President Trump is also planning a trip to North Korea, and he last week limited joint training with South Korea. So what kind of message is this sending out to allies as well as those two countries?
I think it's sending 2 messages. For the South Koreans and other allies of the United States, it's signaling that the president is upset with countries that haven't backed and haven't helped support the war effort in Iran. South Korea hasn't, and the president said this weekend that that was part of the reason why they were canceling these joint trainings. It also potentially sends a message to North Korea and the North Korean leaders. If you recall, the first Trump administration, the president was interested and animated by trying to strike some sort of deal with North Korea around nuclear weapons, trying to change the relationship between the United States and North and South Korea. Perhaps this is another carrot to try to get North Koreans to come to the table and make a deal on things, especially around nuclear weapons and their military posturing. But we'll have to see if that actually makes any difference.
Yeah, but how much did we really see come out of that first meeting? And is there any real benefit this time around to meet with Kim Jong-un?
We didn't see anything really good come out of it last time. I think most analysts would tell you that they'd be pessimistic that much would change this time around. But I think for the president, he must think that there's an opening here, or at least using this opportunity to try to reopen talks, try to re-engage with Kim Jong-il in a way that he hasn't been able to in quite a while.
And touching on the conflict with Iran right now, it just seems like nothing is really moving, at least positive, in the direction for the U.S. now.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there's a reason why the United States and previous presidents have been really hesitant to engage in a military conflict with Iran. Most or many folks would have told you that this sort of quagmire, stalemated outcome was the most likely thing to occur from an attempt to engage with the Iranians militarily. And so that's what we're seeing. Like there's hard to make any movement on the ground with military. It's hard to make any movement in diplomacy, so we seem to be stuck in neutral, which really isn't good for anyone.
Yeah, it seems like it's always very difficult if we get involved in the Middle East. There's no way, hardly, to get out of the mess, right?
And we've done it time and time again, but yet we seem to keep making these mistakes.
All right. Hey, Jim Curry, thank you very much for being with us. Appreciate your insight and expertise on these political subjects. And we wish you the best at Notre Dame now, since you've started your new career there as school starts this week.
Thanks, and thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. We'll do it again sometime.